Zags got dudes, and none of them with more upside than newcomer Mario Saint-Supery from Spain.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, it is a Mario party here on Locked On Zags today. We got some mailbag questions we're going to get to close out the show. We got some discussion on Khalif Battle's new threads, Drew Timme's choice in the NBA Summer League. We're going to get to all of that, and we planned and prepped for this live edition of Locked On Zags to be about Texas State joining the Pac-12, what it means for the conference, what it means for Gonzaga. And we're going to have that conversation on Tuesday's episode of Locked On Zags, because about 10 minutes before we went live here on Monday morning, it was finally announced and confirmed that 6'3" Spanish guard Mario Saint-Supery will be joining the Gonzaga Bulldogs this upcoming season. If you're a longtime listener to the show, if you've been somebody who is following this Gonzaga offseason, you have likely heard the name Mario Saint-Supery. If not, we will do an introduction of who he is, what the timeline has been here for this commitment for the Zags, and how he might fit onto the roster this upcoming season. It's been known for a while that Mario Saint-Supery was going to come to Gonzaga. It was reported by many outlets over in Europe, over in Spain, as long as a month plus ago. I think the last time I did an episode that focused on Saint-Supery was May 16th. So it's literally 6 weeks ago. And at that time, it had already been reported by other media outlets that he was coming to Spokane, but the official word had not happened. Saint-Supery had not confirmed it on any of his social media, and the Zags had not confirmed it as a school. And then on Monday morning, Saint-Supery posted on Instagram a kind of goodbye message to his team in Spain. He said in the post, which was translated, so the language was a little wonky, but in the post, he said he was going to a different country to begin a different stage of his career, but he didn't mention Gonzaga by name. But I still thought when I saw that post, it feels like it's got to be coming soon. And I've had this inkling that this news was going to happen on a day where there was also other big Gonzaga related news. And of course, that is what the case is here with this Texas State coming to the Pac-12. Like we said, we'll get to that later, but this is incredibly exciting for Gonzaga. And again, to highlight how long of a process this has been, I have confirmation that when Gonzaga was pursuing guard Isaiah Pasha in the transfer portal, this was way back in April. Pasha had listed Gonzaga in his top 8. I think he'd even had them in his top 3 at one point, and was fully planning on taking a visit to Spokane. I think that Gonzaga was his top choice to commit to out of the transfer portal. And Gonzaga effectively told him, hey, we're working on getting a deal with an international player, a guard that we think is going to fill a lot of the same roles as you. So, thanks, but no thanks kind of thing. And he ended up committing to Penn State a little bit later, but that was months ago. And that was about Mario Saint-Supery. So Gonzaga has been invested and involved in the recruitment of Saint-Supery internationally for a very long time. And not only that, they have felt confident that he was going to come to campus, confident enough to turn away a player who was very talented, who was young as a freshman last year at Delaware, and who wanted to come here. That's how confident Gonzaga was, not only that Mario Saint-Supery was going to end up coming to Gonzaga, but how good he is and how ready he is to compete for this team right away. So who is Mario Saint-Supery? He is a recently turned 19-year-old guard from Malaga, Spain. He played most recently with Baxi Manresa in Liga ACB, also in Spain, of course. He averaged about 6.5 points, little under 4 assists, and 2.3 rebounds per game. As is always the case when talking about international players, especially young international players playing overseas, it is important to note the quality of competition. And in this case for Saint-Supery, he was playing against grown men. For reference, this is the same team that he previously played for a team that Killian Tilly currently plays on. And he was playing on that team as a 17/18-year-old. The team that Killian Tilly currently plays on, Mario Saint-Supery played for that team as an 18-year-old. This team, Baxi Manresa, is a team where he was playing against former college players, legitimate European professionals, guys who were 25 to 30, sometimes well into their 30s at times. And he was playing with this team as a fresh-faced 19-year-old. So to average 6.5 points and 4 assists, pretty darn impressive when you consider the age difference and the quality of competition. Again, this isn't, Liga ACB in Spain is a high-quality professional basketball league. It's not the NBA, but there are a lot of worse professional leagues overseas than this one. This is a good quality league, and Saint-Supery was excellent while playing in that league. He also represented Spanish on their national team in the FIBA Eurobasket 2025 qualifiers, and with the U18 team back in 2024, he dominated. When he was actually competing against his peers, against players his age in 2024, Saint-Supery averaged 21.7 points, 6.6 assists, and 5.6 rebounds per game. There was a phenomenal article written by Emmett Ryan. I will link to it in the show notes, discussing Saint-Supery's upside. This was written about 3 months ago, and the context of the article is writing about him as if he is a NBA draft prospect. So there's some, he's like, well, I don't know if he should be drafted this year, blah, blah, blah. But it's still a great kind of scouting report on Saint-Supery from somebody who saw him live in Spain. And I'll just kind of paraphrase a few of his points. He's very clear that he is a pass-first point guard. He is somebody who looks to pass, looks to facilitate, looks to get his teammates open before he looks to score himself. The obvious comparison, and I will caution that this is maybe not a comparison we want to throw around too liberally necessarily, but in terms of play style, the comparison that Emmett Ryan uses is Ricky Rubio, who is, of course, one of the best passing guards in the history of basketball. And while his NBA career didn't pan out in part because of injuries, I say didn't pan out. He was still a good NBA player, just didn't have the upside people hoped. He was still a tremendous passer. And if Saint-Supery is anything like Ricky Rubio, that is a massive coup for Gonzaga to land this player on the final day of June. Saint-Supery is also a fluid athlete. He loves to go fast. He moves at super high speeds. Quickness is maybe an area that you'd want to see a little growth, especially as a decision maker. How quick can he make reads? Things that, it's easy to judge him when playing against 28-year-olds. And when he's playing against people closer to his age, I suspect some of those things will improve, especially, of course, as he gets comfortable in Gonzaga's system. And I think that's the next big question. How impactful can Saint-Supery be this season for Gonzaga? Because he's not getting to campus until the summer. He's an international player coming to campus late. There's going to be a culture shock. There's going to be a language barrier potentially. There's going to be, we have seen this. Gonzaga has brought over many, 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 many extraordinarily talented players from overseas. Very few of them make a dynamic, program-changing impact in their first year. Rui Hachimura was an All-American. He didn't do anything as a freshman. Shemek Karnowski developed into a phenomenal low-post player. He was pretty raw his freshman year. Filip Petrusev was an All-American as a sophomore, but as a freshman, he was kind of up and down at times. This is pretty consistent for Gonzaga throughout their international recruiting, and especially for guys who didn't commit or didn't land on campus until just a few months before the season began. Having said that, the talent is so obviously there for Saint-Supery, as is the fit, as is the need. Gonzaga's biggest hole on this roster, some will argue it's like a stretch four, and I think that is an area where, depending how confident you are in Parker Jefferson's ability to play as a freshman, it's a bit of a concern on the roster, but backup point guard was a big need. And that need has full on been taken care of with Saint-Supery. The expectation in my mind is that Braden Smith is still the starter. He has over a year of playing, or over a year of familiarizing himself with the system, with the coaching staff, with what is being asked of playing a point guard, that it's just it's very difficult to imagine Saint-Supery overtaking Smith in the next couple of months. I wouldn't be shocked if Saint-Supery eventually starts cutting into Smith's minutes, potentially fairly significantly, if he hits that best case scenario of like seamlessly understanding the offense and fitting into the team and finding his teammates and things like that. Smith has a huge advantage right now, and I have a hard time imagining that playing time dissipating for him and going to Saint-Supery super early in the season. But this kid's upside is tremendous. That was one of the shows I'm planning this week or maybe next week, depending on timing, is to kind of talk about, hey, the Zags streak of having players drafted ended in 2025. Will anybody start it again in 2026? And while I don't think Saint-Supery will play enough to be in the draft conversation next year, I think there's a very reasonable chance he is the best NBA prospect on this roster as soon as he committed. In fact, I feel pretty confident in saying that is the case. Ismaila Diani is potentially in that conversation as well with a high upside player. Gonzaga's other veterans just don't have a ton of upside as NBA players. But Saint-Supery, I think, does because of his size, his passing ability, his fluidity, his performance against high-level athletes in Europe. This is a kid who could be a really big impact maker for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and it could be happening as soon as this season, even if I don't think he necessarily steps into a huge role right away for the Zags. Well, we're going to have plenty more on Mario Saint-Supery over the next couple of weeks, months leading into the season. We'll talk to some people who've seen him play more. We'll kind of get a better sense of what his role is going to look like. But right now, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Summer League. Khalif Battle found himself a new team after we've been waiting to see where he was going to sign after he went undrafted in the 2025 NBA draft. We're going to discuss Battle's fit in Phoenix with the Suns and some other NBA Zag updates coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golfing on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game just a little more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned out on the beach. You can use FanDuel to track your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. So whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right out into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. If this signing has you juiced for what the Gonzaga Bulldogs are going to do next year, they're still at plus 3,000 to win it all in 2026. If you like those odds, head to FanDuel right now. And if you're new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Still having our Mario party here on Locked On Zags as we celebrate Gonzaga's finally edition of Spanish guard Mario Saint-Supery, who is committed to the Zags. And there was a press release on Monday morning, just about half an hour ago, as we're recording this live at about 10:40 a.m. on Monday morning. We're going to move on from talking about Saint-Supery, however, and we're going to talk about some NBA Summer League updates for the Gonzaga program. Khalif Battle, one of 4 graduating seniors from Gonzaga's roster last year, has officially made sure that he will be participating in Summer League in NBA or in the Las Vegas Summer League for the NBA this in the next week or so. I think it starts on July 10th, so just a little over a week until Summer League gets started. And now 3 of the 4 Zags are at least going to be on rosters for Summer League. We know Ryan Nembhard has signed with the Dallas Mavericks on a 2-way contract after going undrafted. We know Ben Gregg has signed with the Boston Celtics to participate with them. And now we know Khalif Battle has signed with the Phoenix Suns. And the report that I saw was on Twitter, and it was not clear what kind of contract Khalif Battle is signing. My assumption is if it is not reported as a 2-way contract, it's not a 2-way contract. If it's not reported as an Exhibit 10 contract, it's not an Exhibit 10 contract, meaning that if it's just reported Khalif Battle is joining the Phoenix Suns, then that's all that's really happening. Every team will have a roster full of players in summer league. Some of those players will already be inked to two-way deals where they're guaranteed to be part of the NBA and G League roster. Some of those players will be signed to Exhibit 10 deals, which means they're guaranteed to be part of the G League roster if/when they get cut from the NBA roster. And then the other players are kind of just filling out the roster, being given an opportunity to compete to get one of those Exhibit 10 deals or to get one of those two-way contracts, but they're not being given that ahead of time. That is my assumption for the deal that Khalif Battle has signed. Also, incidentally, that is my assumption on the deal that Ben Gregg has signed with the Boston Celtics as well. Neither of them have been reported to be on Exhibit 10 or two-way deals. So they are just competing for those teams in Summer League. And really, in that case, kind of competing for all the teams in some ways. Like if you're an Exhibit 10 deal, like Augustus Marciulionis from St. Mary's is Exhibit 10 deal with the Lakers. Like he's going to play for the South Bay Lakers unless the Lakers cut him. So while he's competing in Summer League, he's still competing to prove himself and look good and all that. But he's not. Other teams are not scouting him of like, oh, should we try to grab him? Should we snag him? Because he's already kind of locked into being with that South Bay Lakers team. Khalif Battle gets a chance to kind of compete for everybody during Summer League. And I've said this multiple times about Khalif Battle. I think he's the kind of player who excels in Summer League. I think he's going to put up good numbers. It depends what Phoenix wants to do. If there's certain players that they really want to feature in Summer League, and I'm sure that there are. Rasheer Fleming was the first pick of the second round. I know he's a guy that Phoenix is very interested in seeing what he can do, and so I'm sure he's going to have the ball a lot, and they're going to look at him as a valuable piece for this team. But Khalif Battle is the kind of guy who, in a situation that's a little unscripted, where there's not a lot of play calling and there's not a lot of specific designed roles and coaching and things like that, Khalif Battle's ability to put the ball on the deck, drive to the rim, draw contact, and get to the free throw line, I think will help him excel, and I think will help him be highly productive in Summer League. Is it enough to get him one of those guaranteed deals? Hard to say. Depends how much they play him. Depends on a lot of different factors. For Phoenix, they are fairly well stacked at the 2-3 positions. They just traded for Jalen Green, in the Kevin Durant trade. So they have Jalen Green, they have Bradley Beal for now, having a hard time getting rid of him. They just drafted Rasheer Fleming. They also have Grayson Allen, Cody Martin, and Colin Gillespie all kind of filling in those minutes. But again, Battle's not the team that Battle lands on is not like looking for him to immediately fill an NBA role. They're looking at somebody that they can put on their G League team, the Valley Suns, in this case for Phoenix. And I think Khalif Battle is the kind of player that would fit nicely on that team and would look good in G League and be an opportunity, putting himself in an opportunity where if this Phoenix team does just kind of blow it up this year, which I think is fairly likely, they end up bringing him up at some point during the season and letting him kind of play some minutes, play alongside Devin Booker potentially, and get an opportunity to kind of show what he's capable of. So not a bad spot for Khalif Battle to land, all things considered at this point. We wait to see what happens with Nolan Hickman. If he does end up in the Summer League, if he does end up playing overseas, where he ends up playing professionally at his next stop is kind of still the last domino to fall out of this class. But we now know Battle, Nembhard, and Ben Gregg will be in Summer League this year, and so will Drew Timme. Drew Timme is going to participate in Summer League with the Brooklyn Nets. It'll be his third year in a row participating in the Summer League. He had his team option with Brooklyn exercised over the weekend, meaning he is going to be back with Brooklyn. He has a guaranteed NBA contract with the Brooklyn Nets, but he's still fighting for his spot. He mentioned this to Isabel Gonzalez of CBS. He said, I recognize that just as easily as I can be given a spot, it can be taken away from me. And I don't want to take that for granted. I don't want to be in a position where I'm assuming I'm safe. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to compete and I'm going to work and I'm going to get myself better during Summer League. And I don't blame Drew for this. I think it's a good attitude to have in general, but also the Brooklyn Nets just had 5 first-round picks this year and they used every single one of them, which was bananas. By the way, I cannot believe Brooklyn didn't package some of these picks, trade up in the draft, and get a higher upside player, because having 5 first-round rookies on your roster is very difficult. You either end up cutting a first-rounder or you have to cut other players. It's just kind of a messy situation. So again, I don't blame Drew for feeling like, I got to make sure I make this roster and don't get cut at the end of training camp. of those 5 players that the Nets drafted, only Danny Wolf, who was their last first-round pick, 27th overall, he's kind of the only one who's competing with Drew for minutes, but they are somewhat similar players. Danny Wolf's a better ball handler and a bit of a better passer. He's also a good low-post scorer, although not quite as good footwork-wise as Drew. But they are similar, not great defensive players, good offensive hubs, good low-post scorers. I think that they're very similar, and I do think that the Nets are going to have a hard time rostering both of them. So I'm hoping that Drew's experience will give him an opportunity here, but it's going to be tough for him to at least make the Nets roster. I think he's got an advantage by having a guaranteed contract, but it's going to be tough to carve out playing time in that Brooklyn roster. So those are your guaranteed summer league guys for the Zags right now: Nembhard, Greg, Battle, and Drew Timme. We suspect that some Anton Watson will probably catch on with the summer league team as of this recording. He has not signed anywhere. Malachi Smith, Jeremy Jones seem plausible as guys who were in the G League last year. Maybe some guys come back to the United States to play in summer league from overseas, like a Killian Tilly or a Philip Petrusev or Joel Ayayi or Rasir Bolton or somebody like that. But right now, we only know of the 4 Zags in summer league. We know some other WCC stars. Augustus Marcelonis, like we mentioned, will be with the Los Angeles Lakers on an Exhibit 10 contract. And then Marcus Williams from San Francisco, he has joined the Miami Heat, presumably on a similar deal to Battle and Greg, where he is not signed to a contract other than just being on that Miami roster, but we'll get a chance to compete for them as well. Well, folks, does CBS anchoring the Pac-12's media deal mean bye-bye to ESPN? We're going to talk about that and more for our brief Mailbag Monday segment coming up here in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And we're closing out the show with a handful of mailbag questions from Jeff via Gmail covering conference realignment, some media rights deals, and some NBA draft stuff here. We're going to get straight into them. First question here from Jeff. He says, now that we know that CBS is going to be a significant part of the Pac-12 media deal, how excited are you to see Gonzaga play several future games on CBS and CBS Sports? And as John Canzano notes, this move could signal ESPN is out for the Pac-12. So how do we feel about that? Yeah, I'm excited for CBS. CBS has always done a good job. They have quality basketball, college basketball content. John Rothstein's there. Matt Norlander and Gary Parrish are there. There's a lot of really Kyle Boone, Cam Salerno guys that I've podcasted with before. This is a very good, solid group for CBS. I think that they're not going to run into the same issues that ESPN has had, where they schedule games in 2-hour time slots, even though the games never take 2 hours. And therefore, Gonzaga games were always starting 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 minutes late sometimes and ending up on ESPN News and frustrating everybody. So CBS won't have those same issues. CBS Sports and just flagship CBS are very quality. I'm curious how many of Gonzaga's games will get dumped to Paramount Plus. I suspect not too many, but that is something that could be that fans might want to be a little weary of, I guess, out of this media deal. And in terms of ESPN, like, I'm gutted for Sean Farnham and Dave Fleming, who've covered this team for so long, but I also don't know that ESPN is out. Like, I know Canzano is reporting that they're likely out. It makes sense that CBS and ESPN wouldn't both be part of this media deal, but until we know the media deal, I'm not writing off ESPN as being part of it just yet. Next question here from Jeff. He says, while it was surprising that Ryan Nembhard was not drafted, in your opinion, were there other players who were more surprising that they were not drafted? And is there a way to explain why Indiana drafted Talon Porter from Liberty over Nembhard at 54? Porter was not even in the top 100 on the big board. I don't get that one. Yeah, well, first of all, a bunch of people making big boards before the season is not necessarily like the people who work for the teams are not the ones producing those big boards. So you got to kind of throw that out a little bit. Nobody had Young Hansen, the Chinese center that the Blazers drafted at number 16. Most people didn't even have him in the top 30. And yet it was reported that the team at 17, which was Minnesota, and the team at 19 were both planning to take him if the Blazers didn't take him at 16. So you got to just kind of assume that the big boards are not always entirely accurate. Tylen Porter shot 45% from three on a high volume last year at Liberty. He's a bigger guard who shoots the absolute crap out of the basketball. That's why the Pacers took him. It's also in late rounds, like late second round. At that point, a lot of players are already negotiating undrafted free agent contracts, two-way contracts. So the Pacers may have just been looking to find a player who is willing to sign a two-way deal and not looking for a guaranteed deal. And that's what they found in Tylen Porter. In terms of other surprising players, I was kind of surprised Hunter Sallis did not get drafted. I know we got another question about him coming up in a second, so I won't go into it too more. RJ Lewis was also mentioned by Jeff, the All-American from St. John's. I'm actually less surprised that RJ Lewis didn't get drafted. I just don't think he has an NBA skill set, so I'm not super shocked that he didn't get picked. Other guys, like, there was just nobody that was too surprising. Like, I would have been surprised if Amari Williams didn't get drafted, but he snuck into the very last, towards the end of the draft. Kobe Brea, same thing. I was a little surprised Vlad Golden from Michigan didn't get picked, but again, he's kind of a center in the same vein of like Drew Timme or Shibwe or those guys who maybe don't have a bunch of modern skill sets. So again, not a shock to me there for Vlad Golden. So nobody who really stunned me the way that somebody like Amari Williams or Kobe Brea or Sion James or some of those guys might have surprised me if they hadn't gotten picked. Jeff goes on, he says, speaking of Hunter Sallis, his 2 years at Gonzaga worked out much different than his 2 years at Wake Forest. At Gonzaga, he came off the bench while also playing in 7 NCAA tournament games. While at Wake Forest, he started but then never played in the NCAA tournament. While I would not call his Wake Forest career a failure, is it fair to classify Hunter Sallis' time at Wake Forest as somewhere between a huge disappointment and unrealized expectations? No, that is not fair at all. I think I'm struggling to understand how we can classify Hunter Sallis' time at Wake Forest as he started but then never played in the NCAA tournament. Like, that is an incredibly misleading way to describe a player who was all ACC first team 2 years in a row. He did not just start at Wake Forest. He was one of the best guards in one of the best conferences in college basketball. I know the ACC was down last year. I know that. But in a conference that had Chucky Hepburn and Tyrese Proctor and RJ Davis and Seth Trimble and Elliot Cadeau and Jaden Zachary and Chase Hunter from Clemson. Like, this conference was absolutely stacked with guard talent. And Hunter Sallis was an all ACC first teamer 2 years in a row. He averaged over 18 points per game 2 years in a row. He was the initiator, the creator. He was the best player on a decent Wake Forest team. Yes, they did not make the NCAA tournament. Calling Hunter Sallis' time at Wake Forest a failure or huge disappointment or unrealized expectations is blatantly incorrect. Hunter Sallis left Gonzaga for more playing time and to play a different role. He was not an on-ball initiating guard at Gonzaga. He wanted to play that role. He wanted to prove he had more scoring ability than he had proven at Gonzaga, and he did that definitively. He probably shouldn't have stayed for his senior year. After his junior year, he averaged 18 points per game on 40% shooting from three. That was never, ever going to happen at Gonzaga. I don't care how many NCAA tournament games he played in. That was never going to happen at Gonzaga. So no, he did not make a bad decision. He was not a huge disappointment. Qualifying at anywhere near huge disappointment is just blatantly untrue. I think he should have been drafted. I think he should have, again, come out after his junior year, where I think he almost certainly would have been drafted. I think returning to school and trying to fill a more point guard role was a mistake. I have said that before, and I will say it again. But I do not think that his decision to leave Gonzaga for Wake Forest or his time at Wake Forest in general were anything other than highly successful endeavors for Sallis. Final question of the show. T-Mobile Arena announced a deal to host the Big Ten Women's Tournament in 2027 and the Big Ten Men's Tournament in 2028. The Big Ten and Pac-12 men's tourneys are at the same time, so the Pac-12 would have to play somewhere else. How exciting would it be if the Pac-12 men played their 2028 tournament in the MGM Grand Arena in Las Vegas at the same time, especially since both will be on CBS? Yeah, that'd be cool. I mean, I think for the Pac-12, I think being at T-Mobile Arena is the ideal spot. So playing somewhere else in Las Vegas is not as ideal. I don't think this is great for them, but I think for the Pac-12 to be able to be in Las Vegas, to be part of a high-profile event, to be on CBS, which loves college basketball coverage, I think all of this is objectively good. Anything is better than the Orleans, and I'm saying this as somebody who loves the Orleans, has fond memories of the Orleans. I think we're all fairly happy that if it's going to still be in Las Vegas, at least we know it's not going to be at the Orleans Arena anymore. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. So excited. We got our Mario party here with Saint-Supery committing to Gonzaga. We're going to have another show coming out a little later this afternoon on Monday on YouTube. It'll be up on Tuesday for those of you on audio feeds. We're going to be talking about Texas State joining the Pac-12. What's next for the Pac-12, their next steps for media rights deals, for expansion, all that good stuff. We got that coming your way. And then we'll continue to keep you up to date on more conference realignment stuff, more recruiting, more of everything as Summer League gets started here in July as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.